So my name is Lillia McEnaney, and I am an assistant curator at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture. And as you all know, we are here today for our Clearly Indigenous lecture series. To begin, I would like to briefly acknowledge the place where this conversation is happening, even though we are in a virtual space, in Ogapoge within the Tewa world. As a non-native person living in so-called Santa Fe, I am a guest in the ancestral homelands of the Tewa people. And I wish to acknowledge all of the Indigenous people and communities, Pueblo, Dene, Apache, and so many others, past, present, and future, who walk on these lands and steward this place. So for the second iteration of this fabulous lecture series, we are hosting a conversation with the exhibition's 3D designer, Caroline Lajoie. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Caroline.
Good morning. I think let me start maybe by introducing myself a little bit. I have been at the exhibit service, which is a group that services all the museums, the 4 museums in Santa Fe, and also the 8 different historical sites in New Mexico. That group serves as a support for each of the museum, and we take ideas from the museum, the first iteration of an exhibition, and we bring that to fruition by doing the design, the concept, the graphics, some of the marketing, and also some of the fabrication and installation, ultimately, of the exhibition. So that's what our group does. We're going to talk mostly here about how the exhibition starts for us. So what I've done is it starts with some of the planning. I wanted to show some of the planning that's being done for exhibition. So we have a group and we have to make a calendar and a budget, just like any normal institution would. You have at the top of this list, for example, this is a list of the key dates and the different phases of the exhibition. At the top of this key list, you have a series of people. So whenever I'm using I today as I'm presenting, I meant it mostly as a team. There's a group of people. We're always those 8, 10 people that are being consulted, that are part of meetings, that are part of conversation. So it's not the work that's done alone, really. The phases start, if you can see my mouse here, for example, for the exhibition at Clearly Indigenous at Mayak in the Masterpiece Gallery. So that's what I know when I start. I have an idea of how many objects, 120 in this case, maybe a few AV, and the exhibition was based on a book. So that's what I know when I start. Remember, I'm starting with a blank canvas. I have a room that's already assigned, so I have to work with that. Phase 1 here in blue is the planning and development of the exhibition. So you have planning and development that happens first, and that was done almost 2, sometimes 3 years in advance, where the curator makes some decision that the book was written in that period as well, and then produced. We started a project in here where in the green phase and in the initiation, almost 3 months before the pandemic started, for example. This time around, it was a little bit tricky. So we met in person only 2 or 3 times at the beginning in the initiation phase. And then right here, we all started working remotely. So those 2 first phases are done with conservation and the curator, and mostly really giving the great baseline for the project. Then suddenly it's turned over to us in Exhibit Central. So those last 3 phases that you see in orange, brown, and red at the bottom include the design. There's many dates. We don't need to go necessarily through that, but we definitely start with starting some concepts, doing some presentation design, doing some feedback, making sure when we're going in the right direction, seeing what the curator wants, what we can afford, and keeping track, of course, of the budget. eventually at the end of this phase, right here at the end of the orange phase, the design is approved, and then I start doing more of a pre-production, which includes all the drawings and all the time spent on graphics, developing some of the graphics and all of that part of it. Finally, the last part of the exhibition is always the production and the installation. That's the exciting part. Everybody loves that. That's definitely culminates to the opening of the exhibition. So what I have to work with at the beginning of the exhibition is mostly what I want to show you here is I have a list of objects and a list of different groupings, if you want to think of them like that. So I'm given objects and also I wanted, let me go here. I'm letting you see my screen or my complete workflow here, so you have an idea of how the project develops. I'm going to show you some of the research material that we've used here. We have some images that we use for inspiration, that we try to look at what's out there, what's been done before, what's been done all around the world. We end up sometime with, I'm going to show you maybe some larger image here. Many of the glass exhibitions throughout the world are done somehow. Most people choose to do them with just one color. So there's a possibility of an exhibition being all white, the possibility of being all blue or all black, and thinking that those are, I think some of that are the best way to show that type of object. We look at some of these images and go, wow, if we can afford to do that, that would be great. So there's some nice presentation from different museums, and it's inspiration really at this point. It's looking at what others do. I think it's always helpful to do that. We have, in this case, we had access to the book, a book that was created with Leticia Chambers being the curator, the main curator. You could see that we already had an inspiration in color-wise, or a thought of it would be interesting to really be able to support the book and do an exhibition in that same style. If you look through the book, the way it was organized is that you had an artist. You see here a photo of an artist, for example, a series of objects, and then the artist who produced those objects. So this was very artist oriented, and you can see a group, again, a group of images would belong to one artist. And in the gallery, we considered doing it that way. We considered thinking we would do, we would have artists be driving there was 30 artists that were invited. You could have had 30 sections with 30 artists, but, and I think the book, when we start looking at the book itself, let me put it on double pages here. When we start looking at the book itself, we also use what's in the interior of the book to give us an idea or an inspiration of how we wanted the object shown. The book, by the way, for sale at the museum shop. And some more copies are becoming available. I know it's starting to be over. It will have a new edition in the fall, I believe. Is that correct, Lillia? I think the fall is when the new
yes,
the new book comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So this gives you an idea of how the book was organized. It had various chapters that were organized with people, as I mentioned. And then we had a list of objects ourselves. We decided that we would show the objects more divided by, and here are the 15 categories. And suddenly I have 120 objects to take, and then we have 15 cases to use, and we go into, there will be, we decided to put them by subject. So we have some that are related to textile, some that are, everybody likes this section with the gifts of the sea, or, so then we redivided the objects in groups that were not related to each artist, but were related to the subjects. And that was an interesting way to do that. It was necessary in our case because we have a gallery that we have to work with. So the base of the gallery, which I have an image of here, let me show you that. The base of the gallery was is 12 different or 15 different bays. So it becomes very technical when you do the design. Sometimes it sounds like it's going to be all about the beauty of it, but and we come up with these very dreamy images. Oh, this is what I wish it could look like towards, when that's further down in the development. But the reality as we go through is, oh, if we wanted black, should we do the entire environment black? Is it crazy for us if you have been in a gallery? The gallery is actually natural wood. Do we really want to do a gallery entirely black? And we test that mostly in software. We have to use our imagination. Do we want it to be very colorful? Do we want 4 or 5, 6 colors and a very active gallery like that? So those are some of the decisions that are made early on. Although, yeah, early on, but also they've been there. Those decisions are often kept as we develop the project. Here's how it goes for the technical part of the drawings. What we've done from a base drawing, we'll start. If people are familiar with the Museum of Indian Art and Culture, that gallery is down the steps on a little bit of a lower level. So this is a floor plan of the museum itself. You actually enter here. This is the front desk where you pay, where you are welcomed at the museum. And then this is the main hallway. The exhibition then encompasses that lower level. If I show you the inside of the gallery, it's turned around. So you came in through this carpeted area down the steps, and you can see that there are 15 cases. So we ended up with those 15 sections of objects. We decided on some colors. We also had to make some of those sections fit in the sense of having the objects, the right quantity of objects in different category. We ended up choosing to do only some color in a cross pattern here in the center, with 2 red cases and 2 sea cases or blue cases, because we had so many animals of the sea. And I have to say that because of COVID at the beginning, we also were studying how are we going to get people to circulate. You can see in the width of the circulation here, and you can see what the state of New Mexico was recommending was this green section, so that each people would be 6 feet apart. So the gallery was already very small, and there was some pinch point and some small spaces. So that is one of the reasons, if you have seen the Masterpiece Gallery before, it used to be, it used to have some posts inside of it. There was a lot of wood posts between each section, which blocked a little bit of the circulation. So that was one of the decisions we made early on, was to adjust that and make people, force people to have, give an occasion to people to have more space, is what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry. So you can see here how I've chosen to identify a person, for example, and then a person would have 6 feet around them. It gives you an idea. If you have a group of people, then their circle is bigger, and there's 6 feet around that each group. And it gave us an idea of how busy it would be, how many people we could have in a gallery, and how we would have to distribute some of the larger objects as well. I'm not sure if I have, no, I don't have that. Okay, so when you arrive in the gallery, again, you have, you're coming from this hallway, you're coming down the steps. We chose to utilize this entry area a lot more than done in other, that has been done in other exhibition. We needed space for some of the larger objects that we have. So there was development of some of those graphics here that are very important. Natalie Baca is the graphic designer, and she works with me pretty much during the entire production, to make sure that some of the, I mean, to help, definitely that helps with giving an image or developing a good sense for the exhibition that relates to the book. As you can see, we chose to use colors that were related to the book, and we also chose fonts and placement that's in the style of the document that we're using. So here's as you enter the lobby, we have, I probably can show you like alternate graphics and alternate times where we've had other images. We thought, oh, maybe it should be black. You know, if I get closer to this, sorry, I'm moving quite a bit here. We could have done a black title, for example, or did we want to do something with the blue graphics? Do we want to not have graphics there? So gives you a good idea here of the complexity after a while, once we've decided what they are, their placement, and that's also all definitely part of the look and feel that we wanted to create in a gallery. If you turn into a large space and keeping it very open, we thought would be very helpful. You can see that we had one giant piece and the entry, maybe easier to see it this way. I'm going to fly above the exhibition. I removed the ceiling here so that you can see some of the pieces better. One of the large piece installation came from Joe Feddersen and is almost 12 feet wide, and it's lit at the top. It's lit with a special projector as well. Those larger installation pieces definitely required us to place them first. It could have been here. It could have been in another part of the exhibition in the education room. And some of those decisions are being made, you know, without being in the space, without being able to see the object as well. Most of the objects don't arrive before quite a bit later in, I'm going to go back near the title here. Oops, there we go. Most of the objects arrive quite later. Yes?
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about Joe Fedderson's installation of that piece? Because that was really unique, right? To have him come in and install it himself.
Yeah, sure. Well, he came over for 2 days. The pieces were shipped about a month in advance of the installation, and he came over for 2 days. Each of the piece, I don't think I have much documentation or image I can show you on that specifically. Each of the piece of glass, if I zoom in, you'll get to see them a little better, is producing a shadow. So you have the diamond piece, for example, and you can see its shadow here. It's what he did is attach each of the individual pieces. Over the 2 days he was there, we laid out some table for him, and he kept knotting the pieces together with a fishing wire of sort. And then they hang down as if they were, the piece is called chimes. And it obviously moves a little bit with wind. It's also makes a super interesting sound when it's touched lightly, but being glass, the public necessarily doesn't touch it, but the artist was very comfortable hanging that and piece by piece with the help of our preparators. And I had many specific information, and from each artist it's the case. There's many of the objects he preferred having a white wall behind or a light gray wall. He did not want a darker surface. He wanted to make sure, for example, there would be sets of 2 or 3 different shadows behind the piece. So we have a large light that goes in the center. If I put on alternate here, you'll see this circle, and never mind this part of the image here. I'm trying to show you that the alignment or the target of the lighting here in the center of the piece. And then we have it lit on both sides as well, so that it would have a triple shadow and as much action in the background as possible. Hopefully, maybe you should do a presentation with Joe. He has several other pieces in the exhibit, maybe in the last section as well. That was a very fun piece to work on.
Yeah, we're trying to do that.
Good. If you as we enter the gallery here in the masterpiece, the groupings the 2 groupings that are about the sea are these first 2 groupings, so the animals of the sea. On both sides, pieces related to that. We decided that those would be the central piece. For example, the large whale here, this piece, if I zoom in, was much better piece to be seen from both sides. Same for the basket with the walking salmon. So quickly it was decided that those 2 sections was the best group to use in the center of the gallery. What it did, it started defining how we're going to show the rest of the material, because it was the first few cases, case 1, 2, 3, and 4, which I will turn to, were specifically divided with artists speaking about textiles use in the glass, the use of pottery. And you can see in each of these sections, this is textiles that were recreated in glass, rugs, or a person weaving here, different weaving pattern. How the section about the Pueblo pottery was a good grouping to put here in the front. So we ended up with one bay that is speaking of the natural, or the different what do I say? The different artistry, I would say, that the Pueblo people used, whether it's the basketry. And if I turn around, and on the other side, you have what they did for baskets here. And again, it's vessels and weavings now made into glass. So the groupings now had a home, or this first bay of the gallery then became all these different techniques. You can see here that we chose to use some large graphics. This butterfly that's used in the intro panel, and that's a repeated image that we've used. We used it as a shadow inside some of our cases to be, I guess, to remind people to remind people, if you want, of the quality of the glass. The pattern was taken from this pot. Zoom into that here. So you can see this red pot is where the butterfly comes from. So when you come visit the gallery, each of the large images that will be on the back, or each of these shadow that we created, trying to speak of light and reflection, and light and shadow. We did the same thing for this piece, where a background is actually that same piece. Hopefully that's clear enough. Please let me know if I'm moving too fast through the space and it's making everybody seasick, because it is moving a lot. It's easy, and I should pause a little bit more at each place. But so you have you have here a good representation of one grouping, one method of one of the, I guess, one of the Pueblo natural or Native American materials that they've done their traditional crafts, or the traditional art, really, with the basket, with the textile. There's also a section here on history, the Dale Chihuly section. Dale Chihuly came, I'm not the one who's going to give the historical background necessarily to some of this, to some of that. I'm trying to stay on the design subject as much as possible, but Dale Chihuly is the famous Dale Chihuly of making glass, who came in New Mexico in the early 70s and opened a glass shop in Taos, and then moved on to the North Coast. So both of those locations became the center for Native American glass blowing. So if I move out in the second bay, the point I was making earlier is that this side of the bay then has, because the animals of the sea are there, then we move on to the animals of the land and the animals of the sky. So you have a section here where all the pieces related to sky are grouped together instead of being grouped by artist. And I had not remembered that as I am doing the exhibit, I did not see, I have never seen the objects. All I have is one photo of each object. And I'm creating this model, this virtual world here, with only one image. You have here the turtle that is repeated again from this superb vase. And we're in animals of the land. So this grouping, for example, is quite challenging. I have objects that are hanging, there are masks. I have very, very different style object here on the shelf that have, there's definitely different feelings for each of these objects, from the bears and the turtle and the group of animals here. Then we also had to, let's go into the education section. We also had to decide on how some of these objects were going to be hung and presented in that way. In the education section comes back to the story of Taos and the first potters and the Chihuly section. This is actually we chose to have a large image on the end of the wall there. So when you backed up and came into the room in this direction, you would have this image as you can see it through the entryway. It's a hot shop that's in Santa Fe. That's Jackalop's hot shop that's on this image. So it's still definitely, there's still in town plenty of people either at IAIA also has a shop, and here now the people are doing it also at Jackalope. So this gives us an idea, because of it was going to be, this room was supposed to have tools and have things that the children could touch, for example, and maybe an example of a glory hole, the large image that's here. But obviously we had to go to a not touchable section. Same thing for the book. We choosing to present the book and parts of it not touchable for the time being, and do a rotation of some images of what's in the available book. A great section here on how artists have collaborated over the years, if you have not been to the gallery. A section on, most of the education area really refers to what the history of glass blowing in New Mexico has been. So you see the artist collaboration here. The education section also has a series of 5 videos that are running in a loop, so people can meet 5 different artists, 7 different artists through those videos. Another view of the gallery as you come into the next section. Some things are pretty challenging. One example would be here when I was given to design this section. If I turn on Object Alternate, you have a piece here that's called Sun and Moon. It's my moon piece, a star. This piece here was absolutely minuscule when it was received. It was supposed to be the size of this circle right here in red. And this is the size I was given when I was, it just takes a typo in a list of object, or a person saying, oh, it's about yay big. And I'm trying to design. Of course, when the objects arrive and it is, in this case, much, much smaller, there is a lot of those challenge. I can show you that separately on a different list, how many times as you assemble objects, how many times there are times where you have to do some adjustment, and in the end, the gallery is what it can, the best it can be, but some of those objects would arrive and the construction would be finished and the objects were already starting to be assembled. So it was too late to change our mind on some of that. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility that needs to be there. I think in this section, we did a lot of development with the graphics, and the graphic signature for the exhibit, I think, shows well in some of these cases. You can see here how we decided to adorn the case, who is already quite active with some of the graphics. We have a beautiful piece that's on the end, some of these star pieces that we can see straight ahead, or try to have a presentation that's much more spectacular when we can. I'm going to rotate in this gallery. Note that I can describe, if I'm speaking of how some of the technical drawings are done, you can see that I have control over removing the door to the cases. I chose to build that separately. So the case also all have ceilings. I'm not showing them in this, or they have ceilings. They have a header in front of that. And if I put the door back, or if I put the glazing back, so you can see where the glass is, all of that, those layers build. I'm going to put it back to it gives you an idea of how many layers and how much detail really goes on into the construction. The last pieces in, so this last smaller portion of the gallery at the end speaks of the ancestors, and also speaks of the future. So the very futurist piece from the past to the future, and then the ancestor section are grouped. Let me show you a little bit. I'm not hearing. You're welcome, Lillia, to bring in some question or to chime in with more of what you want to see. That's very helpful.
Yeah, you've just been on a roll, so I haven't wanted to interrupt you. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. If I don't know if this is a good time to talk about this, but you've talked a lot about the team of people that you work with, and I think it would be fantastic if you could talk a little bit more about the role of the preparators and the fabricators and all of this, because they play such an integral role.
Sure, I'll be glad to do that. Here's, for example, a list of objects that this is, in the end, the object as I drew them, as the exhibition was taking, something is locked here, as the exhibit was taking shape. This list of objects is offered to the preparators. I'm going to click on here just for a second. As I was mentioning earlier, the difficulty of objects that appear and don't appear. I'm going to make some object flash here. You can see, for example, masks that was supposed to be black and now is blue, or the big bowl I was describing that came and was much smaller. If I flash objects like that. So it gives you an idea how many times there was challenges in this area. Some of the objects came on different size, or a different object was sent for size. So this object list is adjusting all the time. Zooming into its legend here at the top, you can see that we have objects that are mounted on the wall, divided by color. So there would be all the frames and piece of the sorts. There would be details like, this object is going to be very heavy. We need a group of 3 or 4. We need lifts to work on it. The mount makers are the people, the preparators are the people doing the mounts, and the mount makers are definitely have a lot of talent. If you've seen in the exhibition, in that first section of the textile, those textiles are almost floating in the gallery. Some of these pieces were also given a light accent. So the preparators are the one doing the magic of making the object safe, certainly making them secure, but also sometimes floating them. If you recall in the gallery, this group of object, for example, was just coming off the wall as if there was nothing holding it, which is great. And the whale is floating. So there's a lot for the preparators to do. They come in about a month before it's time for installation. Usually they have 3 weeks to a month. There's 3 of them. And they will take care of securing the object and mount making. Now, to decide on which object needs a mount for safety, there's also the conservation group who also came in. In this case, it was Maureen, and she came in to assess each of the objects as they arrive. So she will come into staging. The objects are received, put into the holding shelves, if you want. And then it is decided that we zoom, if I zoom in, that, for example, a challenge of a group of objects here, you have one that's hanging from the wall, 2 of them are hanging, so we have to make sure there's proper and safe ways to hang them. Some objects we decided were a little bit unstable, and we needed to make sure that they were mounted. There's the yellow was the lighting. There's a lot of lighting involved in this exhibit. It's difficult to work with a gallery that already existed. The lighting system could not be changed. So if you walk in there and say, "Ooh, it's kind of dark, wish there was more light." Well, we wish there were more light. It's a fiber optic system, and there's 15 illuminators in the gallery, one illuminator in each of the sections. And there's just as much light as there is. There's not, that's all we have. Now, if I talk a little bit about the fabricators, one of these drawings has fabrication. So we go from the dream image that we have, and that's all they have to work with, because we're starting with a dirty gallery that is not painted and there's no objects. And so we have to give everyone a vision of where we're trying to go, what the look that we're looking for and that feeling. So you have a simple floor plan, and then case by case by case are the objects are drawn. This is what is done for the fabrication group. They will be the one for building the shelves. They will be the one creating the support. And then I have, I've hired separately for this exhibits a lighting designer, Todd Elmer, that did include inside some of the construction a dozen lamp. We came up budget-wise with and the amount of complexity with the quantity of light that we were willing to have in each space, and then we identified objects that needed the light the most, and we did that. There's some more of that. Let me show you another grouping of the image. No, the other one. I went to the other one. I'm sorry, I'm moving around here. So here, for example, how complicated the construction can become. That's the case in the entry, the Joe Feddersen piece we talked about, with the lighting bar at the top and an LED that's included in that runs the entire span of the case. Doing focus for the lighting designer, and then giving you an idea how complicated every time there is a lamp in one of those cases. We did here in the corner, can I zoom on that easily? Here in the corner, you can see that we did a mock-up of the lighting in that we use downstairs in the staging area, and we took each of the pottery, every piece that came and put it on top of one of the lamps to see what it would do if the light would travel nicely through it. And then we had to decide on about a dozen. We did 15 in the end, which is a little more than planned, but it gives you an idea of how complicated the construction is, and all that has to happen again before the piece, before the pieces are installed. So it's not just, there's not much in there that's about taking a piece of pottery and moving it slightly on the shelf or placing it to make it beautiful, because it has to be decided much more in advance than that.
Absolutely. So we have another question that's come in about your background and if you have ever designed an exhibit with glass before, and what surprised you and your team most about the material that had such breadth?
Well, there was certainly, my background is as an industrial designer. I have a science degree from Canada in industrial design, and I'm usually involved in exhibitions that have more of the complicated or the more mechanically demanding exhibition. So I do very few exhibitions at the Museum of Art, for example, but I was associated with the History Museum for 10 years. I've started doing exhibition at the Palace of the Governor in 1990, I'm afraid to say. So it's many years of design, but with objects that are more complicated, or for objects that require climate control or temperature control, humidity, having a control of the light, or high security cases, or exhibitions that were traveling. I did a lot of traveling exhibition in the early 2000s for MIAC, for example. And then I worked for 10 years at History. I think the glass, it's not the first exhibit we have on glass, and I can certainly go there while we talk. I will bring you to an exhibition that we had done here before in the research group. I have the exhibition that was done at the Museum of Art was called Flux. And here are some images of that. That's the only experience the entire group of the history of the museum system has had with glass, is this previous exhibition. It was done by Nancy Allen as the designer, and she decided to do all white. So I consulted with her when it was time to do this one, definitely spent some time with her to see what she was thinking. If I show you one of those images close up, she ended up having to put lighting inside the case that was doing the same effect that I was trying to do by putting underlight in the cases. So adding as much light as we could, and definitely the light was a challenge. Those illuminators, although the fiber optic system in those cases sounds very modern, but it's all the lights are turned on at the maximum right now. There's as much as we could give it, and it gives you an idea here of a different exhibit where she also tried to give as much light to the objects as possible. We have to play a lot with reflection. We had to play a lot with keeping the middle of the center of the gallery, or the two bays, very dark, so that we don't see the people reflections in the glass. It's as soon as there's a little bit too much light in the gallery itself, not on the object, as much light on the objects as we could, but in the gallery itself, then you ended up looking at yourself in the mirror and then seeing the people behind you in the other bays because of the center part being translucent. So it was quite a challenge for lighting. Definitely that's the one quality of glass, it's the transfer of the light. So.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I had actually never seen pictures of that exhibit before. So it's really interesting to see how just how different it is to have it all white. You know, it's just a completely different effect. So thank you for sharing that.
Let's see. Did I cover everyone in the team? Definitely, the graphic design was a strong part of this exhibition. I think Natalie and I, as a team, we had to. Let me go to an image, for example, where we can get close to the object here. We had to find ways to identify the objects. If I zoom in, for example, for graphic wise, and prepare these description, trying to give the advantage, for example, to trying to put the emphasis on the artist, because that's how the book had it, and we wanted to make sure we honored the artist first. So creating graphics, for example, instead of the simple little card that you see when you go to a gallery that has a name of a piece, an artist, a title, a price, we have, in this case, tried to give the honor to the artist, and we use that, I guess, repeated in the education section with an artist list. Sorry, we're going through the wall of the gallery here. You know, making sure that the artists were the ones that were celebrated was a very important part also of the design, I think. And that was definitely a request from the curators. Great relation with the curators makes a difference. We spent 9 months Zooming only and never seeing the objects and never meeting in person. So we spent a lot of time working this way by showing them what it does, what it is.
And another huge team member is the registrar, right?
The registrar, then, oh, that's enormous how much collection does. The people in collection have definitely a lot of work. If I show you collection, the registrar comes in. Here's one of the things they keep track, and the registrar, meaning and also the people in collection. Normally there would be a big team. This time we mostly had Lisa. We had Lisa and some help at least, but Lisa did an enormous amount of work. So you can see here that you have to keep track on lists and notes, and you'll see lists of, you know, this object was packed and transported, and this one has not arrived. This one was delivered by the artist. This one was picked up by an art group. So each piece, their size, all of that, I'm trying to black out a little bit. And this list is enormous. Obviously, there's 120 objects. The list of how many labels, we have to keep track of the piece and their numbers, and that's also a large part. And then keeping the whole team together, probably at the installation. This is, for example, a list of what has happened. It's not very big. This is a list of the tasks day by day that need to happen in the gallery and the different groups. So there's a lot of coordination and planning in that way too. So that means the person in collection here is always involved, the preparators, which group is there when, because we could not have more than 1 or 2 groups at the time in the gallery at the beginning, especially January, February this year. Nicely, by the time the end of the exhibit in May, the restrictions were a little more acceptable. So it was quite a bit of coordination between those different groups, who's there on which day, and making sure objects are being installed safely and everything is accounted for, cared for, and safe as much as we can. We did have, you know, a couple of moments that were not so good. Not sure I want to go there, but it happens. You know, it has happened that it's not as like we think it's going to be. Any other question from the group?
Yes, we have another question that just came in about a particular item. They are asking, there is an extraterrestrial statue in the last room with the 2 glass panels, one by Tammy Garcia. It is not lit, but I was told by the security guard that if the face was lit, there would be reflections on the wall that showed how the face changed expression to a, quote, demon. Did you purposely not show the changing expression?
So there's this mask that was added at the last minute that would have done well on light being lit, but could not arrived or was a replacement for another piece, and we could not do. And if you are referring to the 2-piece here,
he says not in a case in the back room.
There's these 2 pieces that I've done would do well with light, but sometime also, like this fantastic corn maiden did fantastic with the light on it. Did not work for the Joe Featherstone piece. These people had their feet are painted black under, so there was no space, for example, to put the light. If we are talking about this other case, which is the only other one that has background, some of the shadows that we decided to draw in, really more than as a graphic. The pieces themselves are solid. Would be the other.
The same commenter just said it's the piece in the same room with the Joe Featherstone installation.
So in the entrance, okay. We go back there as we zoom through the wall of the gallery here. This piece is specially lit, as I mentioned a couple of times. The sunrise, the Chaco sunrise has a light behind it. In this room, the ceilings are very high. If they would be, there's no Tammy Garcia in this piece, in this room, so that's why I did not think it would be here. In this room, the ceilings are very high, and the only lighting we have is above and between the vigas. So the warrior, the Raven Warrior, and out of sight piece. This is a Tammy Garcia. Actually, I'm sorry, I take that back. That is a Tammy Garcia piece here. These it's an interesting thought. I don't think that when we received the piece, obviously if we haven't seen it and all we have is a photo, we have not tested the light in other direction. I'm going to want to turn the lights off at Mayak in the lobby and try it with a flashlight or with a very strong spot. It would be interesting to test. But it's an enormous space, and it's a large area here. It would not be easy to do a very special effect on that. What we counted on here in this room is we counted on the light that was coming from the two windows that you see here in the back. If I can just remove this, and counted on that to backlight those pieces. I think that was one of our objectives.
So we only have about a few minutes left. We're getting a lot of wonderful comments in the chat. Thanking you, Caroline, for your wonderful presentation. And I think it really provides an incredible amount of information for folks who have never heard what actually goes into making an exhibition on this scale or on any scale, really. Sarah.
It was nice enough not to show you.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you very much, and you're very welcome for everyone. But I was trying to save you from having to see the pile of paper that's also involved in the exhibition. So we had to see the color part, or the images on the screen. I think are a little more colorful. So hopefully this was the most engaging part of it. But thank you for letting me present as well, even if it was very interesting for me to do.
Well, we are pretty much out of time, so I think we can wrap up here. So thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you, Caroline, for your wonderful presentation. If you have not yet been able to see the exhibition, please do come over to Mayak and check it out. And as Caroline said, I think we are currently out of books, but we will have more soon if we don't already. So keep an eye out for that as well. And there will be an announcement about the next iteration of this program made on our social media channels in the coming days. So please keep an eye out for that as well. Thank you again.